I was born and raised in Northeastern Washington in a little town called Kettle Falls, right up on the British Columbia border. And I went to high school through there and then went to college in Bozeman, Montana. My mom's side of my family is all from Montana. So I spent a lot of time in the summers growing up there as a kid. She was a teacher. So we had the summers off. So when I was young, I spent a lot of time at my grandparents and cousins and uncles and stuff over there. So kind of split my time between the two.
How far were you from the Sumas border?
I was about 17 miles from the BC border,
That's it.
somewhere in there. Oh yeah, yeah. No, we'd go across all the time. I skied in up at a Red Mountain a lot, and then Whitewater. Red Mountain was only 20 to 25 minutes from my house.
Okay. And what
So
about fishing? How did that all enter the mix?
I actually, well, fished a lot in the on the BC side on the Upper Columbia. So that's where I started fly fishing. My grandpa and my dad took me out fishing quite a bit. We had three private lakes that we actually ended up doing some guiding fishing operations out of when I was growing up. And then we also worked on the Upper Columbia as well. I worked for a guy named Dale DeSmet out of Castlegar for a couple of years when I was still in high school before I moved and went to Montana. And then I also worked for my dad's company, which is called Three Lakes Fly Fishing. So started fly fishing up there super young. Our little private lakes that we have, my grandpa's lake, which is my favorite one, had giant brook trout in it. I'm sure you've seen several pictures of fish from there, and you had no idea that that's where they were from. Brian Gregson, who's my roommate, he took quite a few pictures for some Patagonia catalogs and whatnot. And a lot of those brook trout skin and close-up pictures are actually from Northeastern Washington.
No
So,
kidding. So you're a
mhm.
generational guide.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
yep.
interesting. Okay. Why did you want to jump into the business? Did you want to jump into the business of guiding,
Um,
or did you kind of
no,
get pushed
no, I
that
fell
way?
in. I think I fell into it. I went to college for cell biology and neuroscience. My mom was, or still is, a teacher. She was a professor at U of I, and then later became a high school math teacher in a little town called Colville. And she has two PhDs, and one in math, one in music. And so it was pretty expected of me to go far in the college end of things. So I went to college for organismal biology and cell biology and neuroscience. So
What
pre-med basically.
what was the end
And
goal? What did was there a niche or was there something particular that you wanted to
yeah,
do?
yeah, I wanted to. Well, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. Eventually, by the time I finished college, before I went to med school, I had a couple clients of mine that were trout clients. I worked my way through college as a trout guide, and they sat me down and said, "Hey, we heard you got into med school. We wanted to take you out to dinner," which I thought was going to be a congratulatory dinner.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
Turns out it wasn't. They threw a blank piece of paper on the table and said, "Write down why you want to be a doctor." And so I wrote down, it was always expected of me, my mom to be proud of me. It was kind of where I'd been pushed my whole life. I was only good at math and science. That was my strong point. So there's what else do you do with that? Um, but really, I just want to have enough money to hunt and fish all over the world. And so they turned the paper over and they said, "Write down what you do now." And at the time, I was doing hosted trips down to Mexico. I was guiding some archery elk hunts in Montana. I just started guiding my first year, I think, down in Hawaii that year, also doing trout guiding all over Montana. Um, and so I was kind of branched out, going everywhere, doing everything that I wanted to do already, without actually becoming a doctor to pay to go do it. So, and they walked me through what med school was going to entail, how much money it was going to cost, how long it was going to take, what the medical profession and how that was going as far as hospitals and private practices and things like that. And they basically talked me out of it. And I was like, I wasn't really sure on going anyways. And so I took the money that I'd saved up to go to my first year of med school and started my lodge in Alaska is actually what I ended up doing. And so came to Wrangell, Southeast Alaska, with my dad trapping, and when we were trapping, I started walking up and down some of the creeks and ended up finding steelhead. And then I decided that I almost kept it to myself. None of the locals knew about them. Nobody knew about them. They were all over the place in these little tiny creeks, and I was like, this is amazing. And for about a year, I contemplated doing something with it. I was like, man, somebody else should see this besides me, but I really like it by myself too. It was like my own little private playground. And then eventually ended up starting Chrome Chasers, which is my Alaska business that I have now. So, and then on top of that, I also started an outfitting business in Montana and kept that going as well. Still do some guiding down in Hawaii. Pretty much have quit big game guiding for the most part. I go help out my little brother who's an outfitter here and there, and do a little bit in Hawaii. But other than that, I'm pretty much just fishing now.
Okay. Whoa. First, any regrets on not being a doctor?
No, not a single one. My little sister finished, she finished med school and became a doctor. And I get to look at her schedule now and it just reinforces my decision. So my mom, not so much, she probably has a few regrets of me not becoming a doctor, but it's not my problem.
What about Hawaii? Were you doing obviously saltwater guiding?
Saltwater. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So I started
Bonefish?
work. Yeah. Bonefish. Right when Mike Hennessy started Hawaii on the Fly.
Yeah.
Um, this will be actually a pretty fun little story about Hennessy, how I met him. We had a mutual friend named Miles Nolte.
Yeah.
And one day I got a phone call from Miles and he said, hey, a good buddy of mine just started a bone fishing business down in Hawaii and has a chance to go on a fish tagging trip to Palmyra, but he's got clients coming in and he needs a guide for 2 weeks while he goes on this fish tagging trip to Palmyra. And you need someone with a captain's license that can guide bonefish. Would it be something you're interested in? And I said, well, yeah, that sounds great. I just finished up my guide season in Montana. I think it was late November. Hunting season was just about over. And the month of December, I didn't really have anything going on. It was a little bit before I started trapping. So I was like, yeah, I got time. I can go down to Hawaii for 2 weeks and guide bonefish. And so he's like, I'm going to give you his number. And so I get a hold of Mike on the phone. He's like, so you want to do it? I'm like, yeah, I want to do it. I was like, what? Give me some details. He's like, well, there's a flight that leaves at 6 p.m. And I was like, today? He's like, yeah, today. This was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Montana time. And I was like, so I have to have all my stuff and get on a plane in 2 hours. He's like, yeah, I need you here on a flight in a plane 2 hours from now. I said, okay. So I rounded up whatever 8 weights I had, as many bonefish flies as I could scrounge out of my stock. I threw a whole pile of tie-in stuff in a bag, grabbed everything I thought I need, and got on a plane at 6 p.m. Red-eyed all the way down to Honolulu. I got there. I think the morning flight got in at like 5:45 in the morning or something like that. Super early flight coming in. And I get a hold of Mike as soon as I land. I was like, how do I find you? He's like, I'm going to be the only one with a flats boat. Be real. I was like, you'll find me. So I walked outside and here he is in a little Toyota Tacoma with a flats boat on the back, comes flying up. And if you've ever met Mike Hennessy, he is very energetic. He talks faster than I do. He's a million miles an hour. And so I see him, he comes ripping in with this little Tacoma and a flats boat. I jump in the front seat. And before he even started anything, he's like, glad you could make it. I'm like, I haven't slept yet. I couldn't sleep on the flight down. And we go hauling butt over to Kehi Lagoon. And he just starts rambling off exits. Take this exit. Here's Sand Island. You got to take a turn here. I'll show you where the boat launch is. I get my lunches over there, as he pointed to some little diner thing, little Korean barbecue place on the way by. He's like, get lunches there. You can get ice there. You can get fuel there. Here you go. So we get to Kehi Lagoon, to the boat launch, and he backs the boat up. I jump out, put the plugs in, unhook it, and everything else. He's like, oh, you already know how to do all this. I'm like, oh yeah, I've been around boats my whole life. We're good there. And so we get in and we go out to the first flat, and he's just rambling off stuff. He's like, at a 0.2 tide to a 0.6, you want to fish this one. You can pull this one at a 0.7 to a 1, and just going a million miles an hour. And I'm trying to like write stuff down and look at everything else. And we pull up on the first flat. He's like, okay, jump up in the front. Let's see if you can see him. I'll start pulling. And he jumps up on the tower and he goes, 2 o'clock, 60 feet. And I look over there and I was like, I don't see a fish. He's like, okay, I was just checking. Make sure you didn't see anything. And then I did see one right before he saw it by maybe a split second, and threw a cast at it, hit it right on the head, scared the hell out of it. And he's like, you saw that? I'm like, yeah, I saw that. He's like, oh my God, this is going to be great. I was like, well, perfect. He's like, okay. He's like, let's head back in. So we head back into the dock, and there's 2 guys with sun hats on and flats pants. And Mike pulls up to the dock. He said, here's Rick. He's my head guide. He'll be guiding you for the next couple of days. Have fun out there, boys. And literally dropped me off with 2 guys I'd never met before. I'd been in Hawaii for an hour and a half. And Apparently I was his head guide at that point in time. I was his
That is
only guide.
hilarious. How long did this last for?
Oh, I still go down there. So recently, Mike sold the company to a guy named Kenny Carras, who owns Why on the Fly now, who was his main guide for quite a few years. Kenny and I are really good friends, and I still go down and work for Kenny, kind of seasonally here and there, fill in when I can, when he has a little extra help that he needs, and things of that nature. And so that was, man, I want to say that was 2006 ish. It was a long time. Might even been before that. It was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And been doing it, almost every year since. There was one year Mike had a couple guides working for him, and he didn't need any extra help during the off season, so I didn't go that year. But for the most part, almost every year since then. So I still go down pretty much every year.
What
That's
about
how I ended up in Hawaii.
what about Wrangell? That's what it is, yeah? Wrangell, where you're
Yep,
at now?
yeah, Wrangell. Yep,
Uh,
Southeast Alaska.
How many people were living there when you went there for the first time?
It actually had more people living there then than it does now. So when I
Oh,
first came here, the sawmill was still running. It shut down the year after I got here, if I remember right. But the sawmill still had quite a few people and employees. And so when the sawmill shut down, the town actually shrunk. There was about 2,700 people when the sawmill was going, and now it's about 2,400.
okay. All right. And then what brought you there? I mean, it sounds like it's quite close. Can you give me just a layout of the land?
Well, yeah, yeah. So the reason I came here in the first place is we used to have a place out on Prince of Wales Island. My family did that we'd go to for a family vacation every year, just fishing, catching crab, shrimp, halibut, salmon, usually in August. And then my dad had come up. My dad had an excavation company as well as an outfitting company, along with a bunch of other things. He was a real Renaissance man, but we had the winters off, so we trap. And so dad was coming up here trapping. I'd follow every now and again over to Prince of Wales. And then eventually he came with another friend of his, I think in 2002, over to Wrangell, and then found some pretty good trapping over here where there wasn't a lot of other trappers. And then in 2005, I came up with him and we trapped a season up here. And then 2007, we built a shop and living quarters in it, and then pretty much came up here, not really full time, but seasonally, throughout trapping season. And that's when I started poking around the creeks and decided I wanted to do something besides just go trap in the woods all winter. So,
Yeah.
but that's how I ended up in Wrangell. Because trapping really is what brought me here.
Okay. So then I guess I don't want to dance around it. Let's just get straight to it. How did the locals, do you consider yourself a local now? I guess you would now, but at the, no,
Nope.
it's dangerous
It's
territory, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's been, what is it, 2000, basically 2007 till now. So 16 years, 17 years. And, I'm still looked at as the outside, the Montana kid, basically, who showed up and just never left.
How did they take you starting to guide on these small streams? Because surely some of them knew about the streams.
No, no, they didn't. I mean, that was actually the smoothest part of the whole thing. They had no idea what I was doing. I mean, they eventually word got out that I was guiding Steelhead, and they're just like, we have those here. And
Oh,
I mean, it was I didn't run into hardly any issues locally at all. In fact, nobody locally fished for them. Like nobody.
yeah,
I mean,
right.
there wasn't a single person on the whole island. There wasn't anyone that flew in. Like, I mean, it was untouched. And you know, fast forward to now, there are a couple of kids that have started the last few years, but even up until the last couple of years, there hasn't been anyone that has even fished for them, hardly at all. You'll hear of a commercial guy every now and again walking into one hole and trying to catch one, while he's letting his set line soak or something. But I mean, it was never done to the extent that I'm doing it, and it was never in the creeks. It was always someplace that you could walk to or park a boat at with a dock or something like that. All the stuff we're fishing for the most part is so remote, that you have to take a big boat to get there. Then got to take a little boat to get into the creek. And then you got to figure out how to get it above a 20-foot tide swing and not end up losing your boat, because otherwise you die. So the logistics of even just getting to one of these places to catch a fish prohibited pretty much anyone from even trying.
Right.
So that was a major barrier to entry that the locals just didn't even want to try,
How
even if they did know there
exciting.
was steelhead. Yeah.
What about the
So that
biologists? I know in Canada, if this was happening in BC, the biologists would be all over us. Did you end up getting approached by anybody?
Yes, yeah. So I've actually worked quite closely with Alaska Fish and Game, plus the Trout Unlimited Alaska chapter, as well as the Wild Salmon Center over the years to document, because all these creeks that I was fishing were not previously documented to have steelhead in them. And
Right.
so, I got to basically put my name on the map as far as putting steelhead in stream systems that were previously unrecorded. And so I did a whole bunch of those, and have for a whole bunch of years. That started when I first started. They were approaching me about it, and so I basically just kind of help out where I can there, documenting different watersheds. And I try to go and find new ones all the time. I've been here for a long time. I've been up about every single creek I can think of within 100 miles circle of where we are. And there's some that I just have never found a fish in. And then all of a sudden I'll find them in it sometimes. So, it's worth checking multiple times to make sure that there is or isn't fish in them. So,
Yeah. Can I pepper you with questions on this? Because
yeah. Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, for me,
Hammer
that's
them out.
just a dream come true, right? To have your own little area where there are no people and nobody, even the biologists
Mhm.
don't know about them. I mean, that's very exciting. So, are they spring fish?
Yeah,
Are
they're
they
spring fish. So it would be considered a winter fish. Obviously spring in Alaska is the same as, February in Alaska, or February on the OP is the same as April in Alaska temperature wise. So they're winter run fish. They spawn in the spring. They are very quick in the system. There'll be fish that'll come in and spawn in one day and leave. They'll only be in the creek for a day.
right?
One tide swing. That's it. Some of the bucks will stick around for 2 weeks, maybe up to 3 weeks, but it's very unique that they don't spend any time in the creeks. They come in when the conditions are great, they spawn and they leave.
Yeah.
And so it's such a short, weird little system in all the different little places that it's unlike where almost everyone else catches steelhead. The closest comparison is going to be, I'd say, the Olympic Peninsula in Washington, but those
Right.
fish are staying in there 30, 40 days a lot of times.
Yeah.
Our fish probably average 3 to 6 days.
Yeah, I'm thinking it sounds like in terrace there are a few of those sort of systems where
Mm-hmm.
they come in real quick. And again, it's all tidal, so we would have to park our boats so that obviously we didn't get beached so that we could get out of there if we had to. And then when we would collect scale samples, unlike most winter fish where you couldn't actually collect the scale because it had at that point obviously, kind of molded into the rest of the scales, they were
Yeah.
so fresh from the salt, we could actually extract the scales off their bodies.
Yep.
So is that what the same sort of situation where they're kind of small, clear, maybe slight tan in rivers, short
Mm-hmm.
streams, and they're coming in the spring months?
Yep. Yeah. And so last year we actually did genetic scale sampling and fin clips for the Wild Salmon Center with a guy named Matt Slope. And so
Yeah,
we
yeah,
collected a whole bunch of scale samples and fin clips of fish throughout a bunch of different drainages that I have over the course of my season. And so that helped with basically a steelhead genome project is the closest thing to do. And so he didn't have a whole lot of genetic markers for any fish in Southeast. There's only a couple other operations that have been active for very long and doing it, and they weren't able to get that many samples. And so when he approached me, he said, I think he said he wanted 20 samples. I said, do you want more than that? I can get you more than 20. He's like, well, let's start with 20. The last guy's got 6. And I was like, okay, well, you tell me how many you want, and I'll get you that many. So I ended up getting him like 68 samples or something like that. And then he told me to stop because he had enough. So,
do you have
but
any idea on run size? How many fish typically go
oh
through these
yeah,
systems?
I'd say anywhere from 50 to 200 on
Okay,
average
yeah,
per
that's about
per
right.
crick. Real small. I've seen the same fish year in, year out. I mean, you get lots of multiple year spawners. There was one buck in one creek that we called Seal Scar. I saw him for 4 years. He had a super dark scar on his back, very distinguishable, and he just got a little bit bigger each year too. They don't grow as fast as I thought they did. So once
Yeah.
they once they get to about 35 or 36 inches each year, they only grow an inch or two more than that. And so they get to that size really quick. And then it's pretty slow after that from my experience anyways.
That is a bloody cool experience. Okay, what about salmon? Do any salmon go into these streams?
Yep. Yep. A lot of creeks, most of them get 4 species of salmon. Some of them get 5, get all 5, kings included. Kings are the ones that typically stick to the bigger drainages down here, but a lot of creeks get all four. Obviously, pinks and chums are the most common. Silvers would be right behind them. And then sockeye is probably the least common alongside the king salmon as well.
So how do you manage guiding on these systems as far as trying to be considerate to the small amount of fish that return to them?
Yeah, I only will fish a single drainage once every 7 to 10 days. I give it a huge cycle. I mean, the fact that this exists only exists because there's no pressure. If there were to be one other person doing it besides me, for instance, it would shut the run completely down. There was one creek that I don't guide south of town here where a couple local kids started fishing it, on a regular basis. Every couple days, someone was in there fishing, and they collapsed the run. The run just flat out did not come back to that creek. They'd go in, they'd get caught, they'd go back out to the ocean, and they wouldn't try to come back in. And they literally stopped fish from coming back into that creek. So it's a very volatile system. All of them are. It's much more fragile than I think anyone knows.
Yeah. What happens to an anadromous fish then? Does that end up shifting their entire migration? What happens when they're
Yeah,
spawning the next time?
as far as I can tell, I mean, with that about 3 years of pressure that system got on it pretty heavy, the whole run size basically was depressed down to maybe 50 fish, and it probably had about 500 that used to go up there. And they were all just getting caught right away, right as soon as they came in. And that amount of stress on them, I think either forced them out early or forced them to spawn, leave, and then literally pick a different creek. So I'm very careful about how much I fish a system. I don't like going in, even 7 days is cutting it close. I like to go in where all the fish that would have seen me last week are already in, spawned, and gone. And now it's brand new fish that have never seen me before in there again. Because they're very sensitive.
Yeah.
It's a fragile little ecosystem. And there's a whole bunch of them. So I mean, you can spread your pressure out over a big area, but at the same point in time, you are having an impact. And that's very important to me, that I limit it to the point where I put as much pressure on them as I think they can handle and still have very productive reproductive cycles. So
Does Matt and the Wild Salmon Center know about
mhm.
this? What
Oh
are
yeah,
their thoughts? I know that we can't be taking otolith samples from fish because that's going to kill them, obviously. But
yes.
I would love to know, what does that mean if they can't go back to, or if they choose not to go back to the small system? Do they choose the nearest one? Do they like where would they go? I'm fascinated by this.
They have one of the highest stray rates in Southeast Alaska as far as steelhead goes. I mean, it's like a 7% stray rate, much higher than a lot of other places.
Right.
Um, there's stuff that happens here that I can't explain. I mean, I've been a good part of it for a long time, and it's something that I haven't really been able to put a finger on. And I believe that some of your fish down in this Skeena and Terrace area, some of those pop into our creeks in the springtime before they head up the main Skeena, because they're a completely different shape, different looking fish that'll pop into one of our creeks in a totally different shape and size than what's normally in that creek.
How do
And
they
so
look
you see
different?
it.
Do they have longer
Oh,
noses?
they have longer noses. Yep,
Uh-huh.
they got a taller shoulders, longer face, and they're skinnier left to right. Whereas our local fish in that creek are going to be shorter face, thicker left to right. And when you see them, I mean, I've caught a whole bunch of fish out of the Skeena systems as well, and it's like, that's a Skeena fish. What the heck's it doing here? In the end of April, 1st of May, and then he pops in, and they get out, and they go on their way. And so I have no idea what exactly happens in some of these different watersheds with some of those outliers. But between the stray rate and then just seeing fish that don't belong there, because a lot of these drainages have a lot of genetic markers. I can show you, I can have a client take a picture of a fish, and I can tell you which crick it came out of just
Yeah.
by the way they look,
Yeah, I've seen that in
because
some of our systems. Yep, you're
that's
right.
just the way they are. That's the way they are in that creek. And then every now and again, you just see something that just doesn't belong there. And it makes you wonder, where was that fish going? Was this his end goal? I don't know if that's his end goal. I have no idea what it is. And so who knows?
Gear restrictions, are there any?
Yeah, single barbless, no bait, artificial lure only.
Single
So
barbless, that's unusual for America, isn't it?
single barbless? No. Most all salmon and steelhead throughout the U.S. is single barbless. So
Is that new?
no, no, I mean it's a lot of them. You can have two hooks on one line, but you can't run a treble barbless, for instance, or a dual hook. So it's single
Yeah.
shank.
I thought it had,
Yeah.
I thought you could fish barbs in America.
There are some places you can, but I think most, like Washington, Oregon, most places have gone to barbless here the last few years.
Yeah, right. Okay. But
So
it's not fly fishing only, and you can use bait on the systems.
no bait. So it's artificial lure only. It's not fly fishing only. You can use gear rods and
Jigs
stuff
or,
too.
right.
Jigs. Yep. They got to be no scent, no bait. So,
Right. Okay, so let's talk about chrome chasers because you got a lot
mhm.
going on from a business stance, and I would love to cover
Oh
some of
yeah.
it. So you start your business. How
Yep.
does it go? Tell me the story.
Slowly. It goes slowly. Where we are now to where I started are two very different places. So we started out running a 30-foot boat and living in a shop, basically living quarters in the back end of our shop that my dad built. I started renting that from him and running my clients out of that. So we had 4 clients in one room with 4 single beds. And then we had the guide quarters that had 2 single beds in it. No living room, 1 kitchen, and really no other chairs or couches. So it was pretty rustic when we started. We were getting into the creeks using a little 10-foot Zodiac with a 2-horse, which I'd then have to drag, sometimes a mile or 2 up the tidal flat to get it above high tide to where it wouldn't go away on me and I could still get back to the main boat at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of that early days, that was, the days were super long. It took longer to get to the creeks than what it does now. It took longer to get into the creeks with the Zodiac. There was a lot of tides that you had to deal with. Like there was a learning process. I only lost the boat a couple of times, beached it once. But there was a learning process. And then over the years, I started adding to stuff. My dad ended up buying a duplex that I would rent from him for the season after that. And then that was a big upgrade because that way everyone had their own bedroom at that point in time. And we had a couch, which was great. And then fast forward to what we have now. Dory and I ended up buying a lodge up here about 4 years ago that's very big and fancy in comparison. Each client gets their own bedroom and bathroom. So it's changed a lot over the years. I got a little jet boat that's inflatable that they're made in Russia. And now we're able to get in above the tidal flats without having to drag a Zodiac. And we go there at 30 miles an hour versus walking a Zodiac all the way up 2 miles.
Oh, I heard
So
those little Russian boats are good too.
they're awesome. Yeah. You probably know Gil McCain.
Yeah.
You know Gil? Yeah. Gil's one who talked me into getting one of them.
Yeah,
So
right.
he was one of the first guys to get one. He's like, "Hey man, you got to get one of these." And I was like, "Yeah, you're right, I do."
Yeah.
So I did. And yeah, and that's been a real game changer. That opened up my fishery to a whole nother basically level of client. Before I could only take the young guys that were diehards that were in super good shape. And now I can get, almost anyone into some fish. And so that little jet boat really made a difference in my operation. I had a 36-foot boat custom made, and my jet boat actually goes on the top, and I have a davit that I can load and unload it at each stop. And so I've really streamlined the process, and that made it great. Now it's accessible to a lot more people than what it was before. I got guys. We had 2 80-year-olds this year. They each caught 10 or 12 fish for the week. And that's, in this country, to even get to the fish, that's a lot.
Steelhead?
So yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's unbelievable.
Yeah. We average about 2 fish a day per person. There's days that are way better. And then there's some days you go up a creek and there's no fish in it. And that's just the way that nature works sometimes. That
Yes.
doesn't happen very often though. I've gotten pretty good at finding them and knowing where they're going to be, when they're going to be there. So
Let's talk a little bit about the fall because I'm very excited. We're coming up to see you guys at the end of or near the end of September.
yeah.
And I love steelhead fishing, and don't get me wrong, I would love to experience the steelhead in your neck of the world at some point. But we're coming in specifically for salmon foraging.
Mhm.
Well, I shouldn't say foraging. So I guess
Oh, we're
salmon.
mushroom hunting.
We're gonna go looking for mushrooms. What else are we gonna do while we're there? Tell me about the trip. I haven't done too much looking into it because I knew we were talking, and I wanted to hear it
Yeah.
straight from your mouth. So we're coming in September. What can we expect to find and to do?
The cool thing about Wrangell is it has what all of Alaska has condensed almost. You can get to do everything. So we have everything from a bear viewing observatory that we have permits on that we go see. We got the lowest glacier horizontally that calves into the ocean that's just about an hour away. We have ocean fishing. We have creek fishing. We have 5 different species of salmon. We got halibut, lingcod, rockfish. We have the most diverse mushroom hunting grounds I've ever seen in my life. The amount of mushrooms here is unbelievable. Super fun to pick those, on top of that, berries and everything else. So
Charles
clams,
Charles is
shellfish.
more excited about the mushrooms than anything else, which is
You,
amazing because when I first met this man, he didn't care at all about mushrooms, and now it's all he talks about.
that's the thing. One thing I've noticed about a lot of my steelhead clients have booked my late summer fall trip. They're like, well, this is a great trip for my wife. It's not super fishing intensive. There's other activities besides fishing. She'd love to go. And you'll go up a creek and they'll start catching silver salmon on fly rods, and the wife will look for mushrooms. And pretty soon the husband's in the trees looking for mushrooms. And I bet you more times than not, when I ask people what their most memorable part of their week was, it's usually guys that were diehard fishermen that have become mushroom hunters by the
I'm
end of the
telling
week.
you, it's
It's
a real
it's it's
thing.
hilarious.
It's a real thing. Because
Oh yeah.
we're gonna talk a lot about your path because you're quite a celebrated chef as well. So we'll get there. But for September, what can we expect? So we roll in. So say I think we're coming in the week of September 22nd or somewhere in there.
Yep.
What are we doing? Tell me what we're doing.
Well, there's silver salmon that are going to be in the creeks. So we're going to fly fish for silver salmon. On top of that, there's dollies, sea run cutties, rainbows. Most of the pinks and chums will be dead or dying.
Yeah.
So we'll leave them alone. And so that'll be the creek fishing part of things.
When you
We'll
say when
probably,
you say crick, I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is my enthusiasm.
Mhm.
How wide are they?
They vary. I mean, sometimes you can lay a fly rod across them. A couple of the ones we fish, would be, a medium-sized river, maybe 1,000 CFS.
Okay.
So, it can be kind of anywhere in there. Depends on where we want to go for the day. We have tons of options. We'll probably spend at least one day out in the ocean trying to catch king salmon and halibut, lingcod, rockfish. We have one place I like to go. We call it Japan, which is basically you go towards the open ocean until you run out of islands. So we basically drive our boat 100 miles from Wrangell straight offshore until we get away from all the land on the far outside of the ocean side. And then the stuff that happens out there is
Oh
unreal. I
yeah. Do
mean,
you see whales? Are there whales out there?
oh, there's whales everywhere. Yep. Yeah. You see whales every day. We ended up catching lingcod, 45-inch lingcod on a crease fly
Oh,
popper with a fly
no
rod in
way.
the open ocean last year. We
Yeah,
catch
right.
silvers on poppers out in the middle of the ocean. There's black bass that come up and smash crease flies. And as far as I know, I don't know anyone who's out there throwing a fly rod in the middle of the open ocean for these things. And they've never seen any sort of net pressure or anything. They're coming in from the outside. So they do really dumb stuff. And you can get away with catching them however you want to catch them,
Oh
which is
my
kind of
goodness,
neat.
you have me so excited right now. So what about Chinook? I know when I've done saltwater fishing
Mhm,
for sorry, king salmon, I
mhm.
don't they sit a little lower in the water column in the ocean than
Yep.
the coho do, right?
Yep. Yeah. And for the Kings, we pretty much only troll conventional gear for them.
Yeah.
And so the regulations during that time of year is non-residents get to keep one annually. So each person gets one king salmon, and that's it for the season. So it's usually we can get everyone their king salmon pretty quickly, and then we leave the kings alone from then on out and start focusing on other stuff. One of the cool things about it is due to the fact that we have, the bear viewing station, the glacier, we have saltwater opportunities galore, freshwater opportunities, we can custom cater it to what the group wants to do. Typically the first 2 days, we try to do just a little bit of everything. We'll probably go try to catch a halibut right out of the gate, then we'll go into a creek and go creek fishing. And then we might go down and check out the bears or something like that just for the first day and do a bunch of different things. And then a lot of times people will kind of be like, oh, I really like that creek fishing. Let's go into another creek, sometime during the week. Okay, we'll go creek fishing some more and catch some silvers on, pollywogs or whatever.
Yeah, I'm gonna be doing that.
Oh yeah. So it's completely up to the group on what they want to do. Some groups have come and they've wanted to learn. It's like, I've never smoked my own salmon. I was like, okay, let's go troll a bunch of silvers up. Let's take them back. I'll show you how to brine them and dry them, and we'll put them in the smokehouse. And so sometimes we'll have a day island side basically where we take and we preserve everything that we caught from the day before. We'll can butter clams, we'll smoke salmon, smoke clams and jar them. and do stuff like that. And so a lot of people have never done that. It's something new to them.
Yeah.
We had one group we made jelly with last year out of huckleberries.
Right.
They've never done that. Always wanted to do it. So to me, it's always just been chores. I grew up making jelly and butchering my own animals and doing everything. To me, it was work is what it was. And I didn't realize other people wanted to go and learn how to do that. It was always a job for me.
How do you get butter clams?
Dig them with a shovel. So you'll go down to a beach and they have a pretty distinguishing hole. The hole in the sand looks like a snowman without the center connected. And that's the neck that comes up through the sand to filter feed. And so you take a shovel and you dig about 6 inches away from that hole and pry them up without breaking them. There's a little bit of an art to it without crushing them, because once you crush them, then they're no good.
Well, how big are
They'll
they?
end up
How big's a butter clam?
that big,
What do they
4 inches across.
What do they look? Now I'm seriously questioning myself. So they're not the little guys. What
Oh
are
no, we
what
have
are-
those too. Those are steamers. We have a bunch of different types of clams here, all of which are great. Cockles, steamers, pink necks, butter clams, razor clams. There's a few gooey ducks on the outside, but yeah, the shellfish is super plentiful. No one touches them.
they're my
It's a
favorite
resource.
part.
Oh, I know. It's just a completely underutilized resource. And I mean, I love eating them. I love digging them. Again, that's
Yeah.
one of those things that, you try to talk someone into this diehard fisherman into going clamming. And they're like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to like clamming. Well, it's an adult Easter egg hunt. It's kind of like mushroom picking. Once you have a little success with it, it becomes kind of addicting. And so it's pretty hard to peel the guys off the beach at low tide sometimes with their clam shovel. I'm like, hey guys, tide's coming in. We gotta go. We got enough clams. Quit digging them.
And
So,
September is an edible month because you know how some months you can't
Mhm.
because of the tides. Or
Yeah.
what is it with shellfish?
months that end in R, or sorry, months that have an R in them is typically when it's safe to eat them. I eat them
Okay.
year round. I've never had a problem. Yeah, so September, October, December, January, March, April, anything with an R in it. So
Okay, cool.
really, it's May, June, and July are the 3 months that they tell you to, maybe avoid for red tide. But I mean, as far as I know, there's never been any documented cases near here. We have a whole bunch of fresh water from the Stikine that dumps in and kind of floods the whole area. And I think
Right.
that pretty much keeps the red tide from, actually getting a hold of any of our beaches. So I've never even worried about it. If you could die from red tide here, I would have been dead a long time ago, because I eat clams every month of the year all the time and have no problem doing it.
This is
But
so exciting. What about spot prawns? Do you guys have spot
spot
prawns?
prawns. Yep, we do. And so spot prawns and Dungeness crab and snow crab or a tanner crab. And we drop pots with every group with those two. So you get to catch your own shrimp and crabs. And again, that's like Christmas time. It's unwrapping a present. You throw a pot in the ocean, come back the next day, see what you have. And we get a lot of really big spot prawns too. Some of those 9-10 inch ones. Would be a 4 count, I guess, 4 to a pound. But
So
they get pretty big.
fall, all these things are there. So you have salmon,
Mhm.
shellfish, salmon in the fresh and the salt,
Yep, fresh and saltwater
mushrooms,
prawns,
prawns, saltwater fish.
hmm
Oh my,
berries.
berries,
Bears.
bears,
Don't forget about the bears. Glacier.
and
Yeah,
whale. Oh my goodness, I'm so like I'm literally. This has not happened to me probably since Guyana. I've got this like the butterfly in my stomach. I'm really
Mhm.
excited. I'm genuinely excited for this.
Yeah, it's a cool thing because normally you'd have to go on a special trip to go bear viewing. You'd have to go on a special trip to go see a glacier. You do a special trip to go ocean fishing and a special trip to go freshwater fishing for trout and salmon. We can literally do all of that within an hour. And I don't know of any other place that actually has that option. There's very few places that probably have that diversity in such a small area. And so it's really unique. You're basically taking 3 vacations and putting them into 1 week,
Yeah. What
and
time does it get
three
dark
different
out? What time is it getting dark out?
about 9, a
Okay.
little after 9. Yeah, so you got a lot of hours in the day, and usually we run pretty hard. Guys are pretty. By day 3, they're starting to fade on me a little bit because it's 14-hour days. It's like everyone's so excited to do it all as soon as they hit the ground that
Yeah.
sometimes it can be a little overwhelming because we can leave at 4 and we can be back at 9. And that's a big day for a lot of people. And we
Yeah.
cover a lot of ground by boat. Almost everything we do, is based off of a boat, and then we use a little boat to go to shore and stuff like that. So It's very boat based, which is super fun. But you get the luxury of coming back to the lodge at night every night, not having to sleep out in the woods and do something like that. So you have a lot of luxury amenities that you get to come back to, which is super nice.
Yeah. What kind of mushrooms are in season at that point time of year?
So golden chanterelles, coral mushrooms, hedgehogs, lion's mane, black trumpets. I mean, the amount of mushrooms that are here, I see mushrooms that I cannot find in a guidebook. Like I'll try to look some up, and I don't think they've ever been documented.
How do you
I
know
can't
that
find them
they're
anywhere.
edible? I mean, the ones that you just listed, I know, but some
Yep.
of them,
So
if
we only keep the ones that I'm 100% sure what they are. The main ones. The golden chanterelles, the yellowfoots. We have shaggy manes too,
the
which is my favorite
hedgehogs,
mushroom.
are
Hedgehogs. Yep.
they?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh, I
Why
love
why
shaggy
is shaggy
manes.
mane? I'm going to dive into trout in a second because I don't want anyone to leave here because we're talking about mushrooms. But why shaggy manes? Out of curiosity, I love them too. I don't like the time sensitivity of them, but why
Yeah.
shaggy manes? As someone who has chanterelles next to them.
Ah, man. It's the same with morels. I'm not a huge morel guy,
Oh, we can't
and
be friends.
I,
No,
I, I
I'm
mean, I
just kidding.
like them. I like them. I like chanterelles better than morels, but I like
That's
shaggy
fair.
manes better than all of them. And I don't know what it is about them. I think it was the first mushroom that I knew was edible when I was a kid, and it was the one that I got the most of because it was the only one I knew I could eat all that was good, and I could
Yeah.
easily identify it. So I mean, there's a little bit of nostalgia there. That was basically my first experience eating a wild mushroom when I was, I don't know, 5 years old, 6 years old. I mean, I was a little tiny kid, and I'd be walking from my driveway is about a mile and a half from where the school bus dropped me off to get home. And I'd find them along the road on my driveway where I grew up. And every fall, I'd see them. And by the time I get home, I'd have my lunch pail from school would be completely full of shaggy manes. And I cook them and eat them. And I've just always liked the way they taste. I think they're a super delicate mushroom. And it's a very sophisticated mushroom. It doesn't have a real strong mushroom flavor. It doesn't have a real strong texture. It's one of the more delicate mushrooms there is. It's kind of dainty, and it's just always been a treat when I'd find them. So I guess that's why I like shaggy manes.
I'm going to be watching you like a hawk when you do your cooking over there.
Mm-hmm.
Because I spoke to Dory at length the other day, and she said that you do all the cooking. Is that right?
Oh yeah,
How do you,
that
and
weird.
I promise okay, hang on. We'll come back to being a chef in a second. The trout. Do you guys have the big trout? I know that there are certain parts of Alaska that have got the really big trophy trout, but what are the trout like in your region?
The trout are small. They're not big. The variety is good. We do have sea run cutthroats, which those actually do get to what I would consider a trophy for that species. We'll catch them up to 24 inches,
Whoa.
which is a huge sea run. So I'd say, if you're looking for a trophy trout, the trophy trout we have here are the sea run cutthroats. They're bigger here than pretty much anywhere I've ever seen.
You're right.
We do get some pretty nice dollies up into the 30-inch range, but those are rare. Most dollies are 16 to 18 inches. Same with our rainbows. Our rainbows are 16 to 18 inches. That's where the bulk of them fall. And even smaller than that, 10 to 16 inches or 10 to 18 inches. So they're not big trout. That's definitely not. It's cool to see where these trout live. It's cool to see them come in and out. Most all of them are anadromous. They're not year-long residents in the creeks. Some of the rainbows are that have lake systems on the creeks, but a lot of the little rainbows, I mean, they just pop in and out of creeks just like a steelhead would. We do have a few fall run steelhead that we have caught over the years. So every now and again, you get lucky and catch a little chrome bullet in the middle of everything else. But those are rare. There's not very many, and they're small. I'd say on average they're between 24 and 26 inches for the fall run fish, where our spring fish are significantly larger. So
Right. What about grayling? Are you in the right region for grayling?
nope. We don't have any grayling. As far as other species in there besides the dollies, sea run cutties, and rainbows, there's really nothing else besides sculpins, and then obviously the species of salmon, depending on the drainage, what we get for salmon. So they're very fertile systems and short, but they're so seasonal that most everything has to come in and out. So it has to be anadromous to one extent or the other. Our dollies, for instance, are anadromous. They don't live in the creek year round. They come in when the salmon come in. Most of the dollies will start coming in at the tail end of our steelhead season, and they'll eat the steelhead eggs. And then as soon as the pinks show up, then they start coming in more numbers. And same with the sea run cutties as well. So
Right.
everything kind of lives off the salmon, just like they do in Southwest Alaska. But they drop back to a lake there. Here they go back to the ocean and swim around until the next run of salmon comes in.
Yeah.
So
You
it's
know,
similar.
one of the things that always surprised me when I guided on the Dean was just how many people put their nose up or turn their nose up at the coho or silvers
Hmm.
because it was kind of our shoulder season. But that
Yeah,
was one of my favorite times of the year. Now, granted, they were big coho. But
yeah.
what about in your region? Do you find that people kind of turn their nose up at the coho?
No, we don't have a huge, basically a bunch of big runs of coho like they do in a lot of places in Alaska where you go and catch 40 or 50 in a day.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
no.
we hunt them more like we do our steelhead here. They're
Yeah.
smaller numbers, smaller runs. And so we actually, spot and stock them per se.
Hmm.
So we go until we
That's what we
find them
do.
up a creek.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so it makes it a lot more fun, so you might only catch 6 or 8, in a trip up a creek. But you know what? Going into a pot of 200 and throwing a wog in there and catching one every cast for 4 hours gets real old real quick.
Hmm.
And so we get smaller runs. The fish size can vary heavily. I'd say our average coho is going to be in that 8 to 10 pound range. I have seen them up, right pushing 20 pounds and then all the way down to 2 or 3 pounders too. So, but a pretty big range of sizes for
Yeah.
the most part. They get big, they get small, they're kind of all over the board.
Right.
They fight good. They jump, just like a coho does anywhere. Um, I think it is kind of nice searching for them and having to look for small groups of coho versus having a huge giant run that you're just fishing in the same spot too. So you're walking a lot, you're covering a lot of ground. You might find a pot of 4 silvers and then you'll throw and catch one of them and then you'll scare the other ones and then you'll have to go find another pod and then so it's more hunting than it is fishing. It's a little bit different than your typical coho fishery.
Yeah, it sounds like British Columbia, which is, I think, why I've always been so confused because when you do find them, it is like treasure hunting and
Mm-hmm.
you would never just pass them up, especially the silver ones. Let's talk a little bit about you and how you came to be known as such a celebrated chef. Because when I was working with Meat Eater, obviously you've done some
Mm-hmm.
work with Meat Eater, and if those guys are taking you seriously, then it's for good reason. So tell me about your cooking. How did it all start?
That was an accident.
Tell us the
um,
story. Tell me everything.
I've basically been in the guiding and outfitting business since I was a kid, and I did all the cooking at all of my hunting outfitting camps that I did in my fishing camps, and I've always done it. And a lot of times, I've always used whatever I had around the camp to make meals out of, because when I had a wall tent in the middle of the gravelly mountains, I couldn't really go to the store and just go grab a bag of mushrooms. I had to go find mushrooms, bring them back, and then put that on our elk steak that we just killed and things of that nature. And so I've always been involved in it to an extent for quite a while, cooking for other people in a rustic outfitter type setting. And then I started guiding down in a place, Molokai in Hawaii, for a private ranch. And every year we had a private chef actually from Australia, a guy named Paul Bentley would show up for these 2 weeks that we did down on this private ranch and do these 8, 10 course meals and super fancy stuff that I've never had before. And I just kind of fell in love with it. He kind of took me under his wing and taught me all the fundamentals that I had no idea. I never went to culinary school. I didn't do any of that. I literally cooked with what I could find and what I had. And he got sick one night on one of the deals, and I got in charge of dinner for 20 people, and I cooked axis deer that I killed a couple days earlier, and I used all the stuff that I shot on the ranch that time instead of quail from England and these shot grouse from England and octopus from Spain. And he had all this stuff in the fridge, and I didn't know what to do with any of it. And I was like, well, I know what to do with that deer I killed the other day. And so I did a whole bunch of different types of dishes with axis deer and some Franklin grouse that we shot on the ranch, and did a whole 8 course meal with that. And Paul, who was down sick for the day, he got to taste all the deals I made, all the dishes I made through that. And when he got done, he said, "You really have something." I was like, "I don't know what you did to any of this. You obviously don't know completely what you're doing mythology wise, but whatever you're doing is working." And so, he helped me out a lot. He taught me how to do a lot of the fancier preparations and some of the French classics and everything else, and gave me a fast track through culinary school in a matter of a couple of years. And I still bounce stuff off them all the time. And when Meat Eater moved to Bozeman, friend of mine was working there, and he's like, "Hey, they're looking for cooking contributors." And at the time, I just, I really liked cooking. So after hunting season, I'd just go and play with stuff and try different things that I thought were going to be good. And I threw my hat in the ring and applied. And then they had me come in and cook for everyone there at the Meat Eater thing, and started doing recipes for them. And they hired me on, said, you're hired. So
Yeah.
from there, that kind of snowballed into another business that I own called Wild Game Chef. And so when I was in college, I didn't know you could take your animal to a butcher and have it processed. Like, to me, it was never an option. So I
Yeah.
didn't know. So when I was in college, my freshman year, a bunch of us went out deer hunting, and a few of us were lucky enough to shoot a couple deer. And we got back to I was in a fraternity, and we got back to the fraternity house, and everyone was going to drop their deer off at the processor. I didn't even know what that meant. I was like, what do you mean? So I hung mine from the basketball hoop
Can I
for a
ask you a
week before
stupid
I cut it
question
up.
on that? I'm
Yeah.
really sorry because being in Australia, where there is no, it's illegal. They can't do it for me here. So I've had a real quick lesson on. I've had to learn how to do on my own butchery as well in Canada and here.
Mhm.
What do they do when they drop it off? Do they bring it? Do they have to have the hair off? Like what does it look like?
Nope.
Do they have the
It's
guts
just
out?
gutted.
The-
Yep. Just gutted. Yep.
So
Gutted and hair on.
so what
And
they
they'll
put it in the
process it
back of
anyway.
their trunk and they just drive up to a butcher and they open the trunk and someone takes it out
Mhm.
and they put a tag and
They put a tag on it with your name on it, and then they hang it in a refrigerated, like the semis have those cooler
kid
trailers.
rooms. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they'll hang them in there, and then they'll butcher them in throughout the season. And they'll usually hang for a couple days, and whenever they can get to them, they'll butcher your animal,
What
and
does
then
that
you pick it up.
cost approximately? Do you have any idea what it costs?
I do. So at the time back then, it was about $75 to $100. Now that same deer to get processed will be close to 200 to 250. And you can have stuff, snack sticks made out of part of the trim or something like that too. It depends on how you have it cut up and made. But
Oh, so they'll do your salon. Oh my gosh, that
oh
sounds
yeah, they'll do it
amazing.
all.
Although I will say one
Yeah.
of my favorite bits is because for me it signifies once my deer is hanging and I'm finally changing, the weather's changing, everything's changing, and I'm doing my butchery. It's kind of my time to get back into my more sane, domesticated self because I just go feral during the rut.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so I think not having the butchery side of things is actually a bit of a disservice. But anyway, I've always wondered how that worked in regular in America. So now I know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
Okay.
there's wild game processors that you can do that. So
So all your friends are
I
doing it.
Yeah, and I was like, well, I'm not going to spend $100 to have someone cut my deer up. And they're like, well, I don't know how to cut up a deer. I was like, what do you mean you don't know how
What?
to cut up a deer and butcher it? They're like, so you guys didn't have to butcher your own cows? And it's like, and these are all ranch kids. And they're like, no, we always sent all our steers off. They all went to feedlots in Oklahoma and stuff. We never had to butcher our own cows either. And I was like, how do you? All right. So my freshman year, I mean, we had about 8 or 10 deer hanging out back in all the trees of my fraternity, and we were butchering deers on the weekends all through fall and hunting season. And I taught everyone there pretty much how to butcher deer. And a bunch of those guys I'm still friends with today, and they're still cutting their own deer up to this day. And they're like, hey man, thank you so much for showing me that. And so when I started Wild Game Chef, that basically came out of, I was cutting back a little bit on my Hawaii stuff and kind of needed something to fill the void for that late November, December area. So I started basically taking and doing cooking classes and contributing for Meat Eater and helping them with recipes and things like that, and then snowballed that into butchering classes and everything else, into sausage making and all kinds of stuff. So it's, to me, it was super important that people learn how to use every part of the animal that they have. And I watch these guys drop stuff off to the processor, and they get this little tiny box of 32 pounds back from a mule deer buck, and I'm just like,
Mm.
no. I was like, you guys are throwing half that away.
Totally.
It's
No
like
way.
it's like shanks, the ribs. Deer ribs are one of my favorite thing to eat.
Hmm.
Everyone's like, what? Everyone throws the ribs out. I'm like,
I
no, 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 don't throw those out. Those are great. And so when I started Wild Game Chef, my goal was to show people how to use every part of their animal, show them how easy it is to butcher it, take care of it themselves, and then show them that there is no such thing as gamey meat, only mishandled meat. And I wanted people to know that, if you don't like wild game, or you think that it tastes gamey or is not good, it's not because it's not the game's fault. It's that the process of handling it and taking care of it taking care of it that's at fault. And so I wanted to show people how good it could be if they did it right. And so that was kind of, it almost was like a philanthropy project for me to teach people to not waste game. It's like, for me, it meant a lot more to show someone how to utilize the whole thing and how good it could be than anything else. And so that was super important to me. And the cooking thing was just a side product of that, in all reality.
Yeah. And then what about Montana? Are you guiding in Montana?
Yep, I have an outfitting business in Montana as well. So yeah, I'm all over the place.
So what does a year look like for you? And and Dory's obviously your business partner and your wife in all of this.
Mhm.
When did
Yep.
you meet Dory?
I met Dory in, I think, 2010, maybe ish, give or take, 2009. I'd already had the Alaska Lodge going for a few years. I was guiding a lot in Hawaii at that point in time when I first met her. And then I was doing a ton of days in Montana. I was guiding probably 300 days a year when I met her. I was on the water 300 days a year, give or take. It
Gee,
was,
a
it
lot.
was, let's just say it was a bumpy first couple of years.
I bet it would
So
be.
my lifestyle was not exactly conducive to having a girlfriend or a dog or anything, quite frankly.
Yep.
I traveled too much and was guiding in too many places for too long. I was gone too long. And
I
so,
know this story. Yep.
yeah,
What about your year now? What does it look like for you and Dory? Let's start in January.
January, I usually am doing cooking classes. We'll start with January, and then by February, I'm back down to Hawaii guiding for a few weeks.
Okay.
And then when I get done in Hawaii, I come up here in March. I usually have about a month to kind of get my season ready and all the boats cleaned and everything fixed that's broken to start steelhead season the 1st of April. Steelhead season goes from the 1st of April till basically mid-May. I usually take about 2 weeks off the last 2 weeks of May that I use to tear down everything, clean the lodge, fix all the broken stuff again before I end up back in June to Montana. Montana, I guide trout from June all the way through the end of July. End of July, we're back up here in Alaska doing our Alaska immersion trips all the way till the end of September. End of September, I go back down to Montana. I usually do cooking classes when I first get back in June and then when I first get back in October. And then I start doing wild game chef stuff and hunting season in October. I have a steelhead camp that I do every year for fun that I've done since I was 16 years old. So I'm 42 now, however many years that is, down on the Snake River in Hell's Canyon. And so that's a major thing that I do every year. And I've only missed it one year out of all of them. And that was the lowest run count year. And I called it off because I felt bad. And I said, hey guys, we're going to give them a break for a year. And so I did take 1 year off, but so that's it. In the week between archery and rifle season in Montana. So the 3rd week of October, typically. And then once I get done with that, I come back here or come back to Montana and usually guide a few more trout days and then start doing butchering classes, cooking classes throughout hunting season to the fall. And then the end of November, a lot of times I'll go back to Hawaii back then too. And then
Living the
December is kind of
dream.
my month off.
Yeah.
December's my play month. So I usually trap coyotes. I like coyote hunting a lot. So I'll shoot coyotes and trap them month of December and do some skiing. So, and then start over again in January.
Where are you guiding in Montana? Are you on some of the famous trout streams?
Yep, all of them, all the famous ones. Plus, I do a whole bunch of little stuff. I've been guiding there for 24 years now. Been an outfitter there for quite a while, and it's Montana, in my opinion, is the best days are behind us. It's just gotten so popular and so crowded that it's I'm the crusty old guy that says you should have been here when I was a kid. And I understand what our grandparents said, and it's great. It's still awesome. You can still get away from people, but it's a lot harder than it used to be. And I still love it. Trout has been my bread and butter since day one. It's always been where my safe place as far as my guiding and life has been. But it's also the one thing that I could see myself kind of giving up eventually. As Alaska progresses and it gets more, I enjoy being up here more and more. And as Montana gets more and more crowded, it makes that decision a little bit easier to kind of step away from trout a little bit.
Are you nervous that Alaska is going to get the same pressure that Montana has, or is it just not? I won't say it's not possible, but is it just not in your future or your lifetime?
It's not going to be anytime soon. I mean, we've already gone through the biggest collapse I think that we're going to see as far as fish numbers and things like that with the commercial fishing industry. And it's still great. And so if it's still good during the worst time, then I don't see it being a problem. You know, the one thing that could change is if the steelhead fishing in Southeast does get more popular and there's more do-it-yourself guys that start popping out, you know, I could see that coming apart. You know, that's the one thing that it definitely could end up like Montana and get to the point where, you know, these fish are sensitive. They're not going to come back. You know, they're gonna go away from people. The only reason they're here is because there is no people. And so if people show up, that'll change. And so that could happen. But the barrier to entry is just so difficult that I don't see that happening. It would take someone more ambitious than I am, which there's not too many of those kids out there. And so I don't see it as a real problem.
So if people want to come and see you guys and book, how do they do that? This will be published in June this year. So is
Mhm.
there still space in the calendar?
There is. We have 3 weeks open right now for our fall program, our immersion program. And I think we have just a couple spots open for Steelhead for 2025 as well. So we're pretty filled up on Steelhead, but we do have room for our fall immersion program. And you know, that's new to us. This will be our third full season actually trying to get it off the ground, you know, and so far it's just been, you know, my regular clientele. We've done almost zero marketing of any kind for it. It hasn't really gotten in front of anyone besides just my current clients. And
Yeah.
so it's something that I'm super excited about. It's super sustainable. And it's something that I could see myself doing for a long time. I mean, the idea that we spread our impact out over a huge environment, you know, we're not just coming and filling a bunch of fish boxes full of halibut and silver salmon. You know, yeah, that's part of it. We will let you kill some silvers and some halibut, but we're going to go pick mushrooms. We're going to catch pinks. We're going to do a lot of other stuff too, just to spread our impact on the resource out over a huge area. And when you do that, your total impact ends up being very small.
Yeah, and I think what's so exciting about your operation is that we get to do a lot of the cooking on location. I'm not as inspired to bring all my stuff back to my own camp in BC, but I am very excited to learn from you. How are you going to maintain this energy? I know Dory had said that you're just a tornado. You got tons of energy, but I mean, you guide all day and you do all the cooking at night and the entertaining. It
Mhm.
just must be exhausting.
I've done it for 25 years now. Not tired yet. Genetics, to tell you the truth. I mean, my dad's 70, 70, I guess, this year, and he's retired. And in his retirement, he has a full time salvage lumber business where he goes and takes beached logs off of islands and tows them in with a tugboat and cuts them in his sawmill. He runs a full-time trap line. He has a trap building company where he builds muskrat traps. He has an extended stay. He has a fur shop where he makes everything out of the furs that he traps all winter and sells to tourists. Eco tour business. What else has he got going on right now? This is his retirement.
Yeah, right.
So I'm pretty sure it's just genetics. You know, I don't see me slowing down anytime soon. You know, it would take death probably to do that. And, you know, and I love doing it. And it's something I really care about. So when you care about something, it's not too hard to get up and do it.
Yeah. Now, if people want to book, how do they do that? Do they go to the website? Do they email you direct? What would you recommend?
Yeah, the website has a link to it. There's an info on it and a link to my wife Dory. She does all the booking. She's the only reason the wheels stay on the bus. If it was up to me, I can barely turn on a computer. So yeah, get a hold of her. There's links on the website plus her phone number as well. So
And I'll include all these links as well, obviously, so that people can book. And I just cannot wait to see you guys and get up there.
yeah, it's gonna be fun. It'll be very action packed.
Yeah, good. We'll sleep when the week's over. What about
Mhm.
bears? Do we have to be nervous about bears when we're out looking for mushrooms?
I have not lost a bear fight yet.
Okay. So,
Have I
yes.
gotten a bear fight? Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there are bears. There's both brown and black bears, neither of which I've ever had that big of an issue with. You know, we still hunt them here in Southeast Alaska, so they have a healthy fear of humans. Most places where you have bear problems are where they do not get hunted. And so where they do get
I'm
hunted,
seeing that. Yep.
they don't want to see you. You don't want to see them. They don't want to see you. And that's usually the way it goes most days. So
Yep.
so very few bear problems. Do you get to see them if you're quiet? Yeah. If you sneak up the creeks, yeah, you'll get to see them. As soon as you see them, they're going to run. But yeah, it's very rarely is a problem.
Right. Good. Good to hear. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I can't think of anything.
When you do think of something,
I'm
let's
sure I will at some
we'll
point in time.
we'll sit down and talk about it in September, because while I'm there, I'm going to get to know you better, and I will be filming all of this for my YouTube channel. So I will be sure to include
Perfect.
anything that we left out in that.
Awesome.
Rick, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm super excited to get up there. Like I said, I actually have butterflies. I'm truly stoked. Oh, hi, Dory. How's it
Dory
going?
showed up. She got back from her hike.
Good to see you. Is there anything that you wanted to wrap up? Nope, we said no. So we'll just clean it up and stop recording.